Okay, somebody asked me for another healthcare spooky story, and I'm about to give you one. Come on, come sit down. So around this time, I was working at two different places. I was working in Chelsea and I was working in Saline. But this specific night, I was working in Saline. Okay, and when I was working here at the nursing home in Saline, I remember we really didn't have any staff. There was only like 4 of us. There was me, my friend, the med tech, and the nurse manager. Okay. When I tell you nobody else was there, so I was on the lockdown unit, my friend was on the other lockdown unit, the nurse manager was taking care of the assisted living area, and the med tech was jumping between all units because she had to pass the medications. Okay. Wait, I just thought about it. There was another med tech on the other lockdown unit, but she was leaving at like a certain time. She wasn't staying the entire night. She was just staying to help out. Anyway. Okay, so boom, I'm sitting in the lounging area. I'm over there. I'm on the lockdown unit by myself for now because the med tech was running around. So I'm sitting in the lounging area. The lounging area is where the residents and stuff hang out and the TV is on the wall, all this stuff. You know, I'm chilling. And so I had already done my rounds a few minutes before I sat down. So I sit down, but then I started hearing a baby crying. Now, mind you, I'm thinking that somebody's TV is up a little too loud. You know, they are older. Maybe they can't hear the TV. So I decide I'm going to walk around and, you know, try to see where this crying is coming from. Whose TV is it coming from? So I get up and I start walking around, opening doors. So while I'm opening the doors, there's this woman who is normally always in her room. She doesn't come out unless she feels like it. Okay. She'll walk out to share a meal with us every now and again. But other than that, she's in her room. So she was in her room before I sat down from the first round. This time she was not in her room, and that scared me because then I heard a door close. So I scurry on up to the front where I was at first, right? So I didn't see her in sight. That scared me. And I was just like, oh my God. So then I look over to my right and I was like, last time they found her in the laundry room. So I walk into the laundry room and I said, hey, we're going to call her Miss Ann. Hey, Miss Ann, what are you doing in here? She said, I was chasing that baby. He had that baby. Now, mind you, I'm not trying to dismiss her, but I felt like maybe she's sundowning. I did hear a baby. But, you know, right now, we're going to get you back to your room, girl. So I take her back to her room. She relaxes. She lays down. All is well. So when I sit down in the lounging area, I hear this man yell. I jump up and I'm like, what is going on tonight? And so I run to this man's room and he is terrified. And so he's also, because this is a, you know, dementia unit, a memory care unit. I'm thinking maybe he was hallucinating, you know, but he said he saw a dark figure holding a baby. Shortly after that, I started hearing all the other residents act up. Like, mind you, there aren't too many of them who will be able to recognize what's going on because they're just that far gone, unfortunately. It's almost like this thing was making its way around the unit just to stir things up. So I ended up praying and I was like, okay, I got all the residents back, you know, to normal. Everybody was relaxing. The med tech came over. I paged them over the walkie. He came over, he did his thing. All was cool, okay? All the residents went back to chilling. It was time for me to chart. It was probably about 1 or 2 o'clock in the morning. So I went into the nursing lounge to chart. Now, the nursing lounge is glass so that we can see, you know, the residents coming. And so I'm sitting there on the computer and I'm charting. And while I'm charting, I look up and there's a dark figure holding a baby. Now, mind you, it didn't stay there for long. But I did see it. I know what I saw. So fast forward to it's time for me to do rounds again. And while I'm doing rounds, this time I go to this resident who really doesn't need help, but we still peek in on him, right? So I walk in. And like I said, this is normally, even though he's in memory care, he normally doesn't need our help. He can walk. He can still wipe himself, clean himself, stuff like that. He still even showers with us just on standby. And so I poke my head in there. He's not in his bed. So I, of course, was like, here we go again. So I walk in there hoping that everything is okay. He's fine, but he's standing in the corner talking. His head is up like this and he's talking and having a full-blown conversation. And so then I said, hey, we're going to call him Homer. I said, hey, Homer. I said, are you okay? So Homer looked at me and told me that he was trying to get the baby back from the man. And I said, what man? He was like, the man right here, he has a baby. He won't let the baby go. Y'all, I thought I was going to prove a point and turn the light on and be like, see, nobody's there. I turned the light on. Homer is still standing where he's standing. And that thing was still there. Except for this time he didn't have a baby in his hand. And when I say standing there, like he didn't care that I turned the light on or not. I don't care about that light. He stood right there. And he was not a friend.
A girl named Liz wrote in and she shared her spooky scary dating experience, okay? And she says that she dated this man who claimed to be a warlock. And also, I have to say, because everyone always gets offended by something in these stories, this isn't meant to offend anyone who identifies as a warlock, okay? I know nothing about warlocks. This is just apparently what this man said he was to her. His mother apparently also identifies as a warlock. So, it gets weird. But to start the story off, Liz was single after dating her ex for like 7 years. And she found out that he was basically two-timing her behind her back with one of her closest friends. And so after finding out and grieving that relationship for 2 years, she's single. She decides she wants a serious relationship. She's ready to settle down. She's 31 when this takes place. She joins an online dating app. And it was one of those online dating apps that you can see your mutual friends. And so she's swiping and she finds this guy. We'll call Jake for this story. I don't know. And Jake had a mutual friend with her, who was a guy that she went to college with. And that guy, she didn't really know that well, but he always seemed cool. So she was like, okay, whatever. And she's attracted to this guy's profile because he's attractive, but also he has in his description, like looking for serious relationships only, must be open to deep spiritual conversations. And she was like, perfect. I want someone that I can have these deep conversations with. Also, obviously, she liked that he was upfront about wanting something serious. So she matches with him. They start talking. He's very charming. She's like, how do you know this guy that I went to college with? And he's like, oh, our families were really close family friends growing up, but I haven't talked to that guy in a long time. She's like, cool. And he's like, look, I don't really like to talk a lot on these apps. Like, I would rather just meet up and get to know you. Do you want to go get drinks with me? And she's like, okay. They meet up and there's no immediate red flags. He looks like his photos. He's very charming. He's very talkative. He doesn't seem shy or anything like that. He buys her drink at the bar. They sit down at a little two-top table. And she notices like the only red flag is that he is kind of flirty with everybody around them. Like the waitress, bartender, even the two girls that are sitting next to them at the table. It's like she said, for example, they were talking about football and he was like, I'm a Cowboys fan. And she was like, oh, I like whatever team. And he, for no reason, looks over at the two girls. He's like, let me ask you two girls a question. Do you think that this team is better or do you think the Cowboys are better? And the two girls answer, and then he sort of brings them into the conversation and he's being very like flirty with them. But she said he was also kind of complimenting her through this conversation. It was just very weird how he would involve other people with the conversation. And when it seemed like he was flirting with the other girls too much, he would compliment her. Like he would flip the script and he would be like, oh, by the way, this is Liz. This is our first date. Isn't she so gorgeous? Like, I don't deserve her. She said the whole exchange kind of made her feel awkward, but the date went well otherwise. They had a couple drinks. He ends up asking her if she wants to like go somewhere else, but she said it was like work night. So she ended up saying, no, I'm gonna go home early, but she did like him. So then after she gets back, he texts her and he was like, I had a really great time. I would like to like hang out with you again. Do you want to get dinner this weekend? Like, I don't like to do dinner on the first date, but like now that I know that we get along, I would love to take you to dinner. And she was like, perfect. Like, do you have a spot in mind? And he picks this place that she had been wanting to try anyway. So they make plans for that Saturday. Saturday comes around, they meet separately at the restaurant. He's already in the waiting area. He's like, I put our names in. And so they're just making small talk and he's doing the same thing, kind of like flirting with other people around them, but still complimenting her. He's like, oh, this is Liz. This is our second date. Isn't she gorgeous? I don't deserve her. Time he was talking to this other couple that was waiting for a table. And when he did it, she kind of pulled him aside and she was like, hey, I noticed that you did this on our first date. Like, it just kind of makes me feel awkward. Like, obviously you do deserve me, at least that I know of. Like, we're here together. I like your personality. You don't have to do that. And he was like, oh, okay. It's just something I do. I'm sorry if it makes you uncomfortable. That's just my personality. I'm just very outgoing. I've always been outgoing. And she's like, no, it's okay. Like, it's not a big deal. And so then the hostess calls them. She's like, we have a table ready for you. And she takes them to this table. And Jake, for some reason, does not like this table. And he looks at the hostess. He's like, you can't do anything else for me. He goes, look at me in the eye. And the hostess does. And he's like, don't you think we deserve a better table? And she goes, yeah, you do. Without skipping a beat. She's like, okay, let me move you to a different table. And she positions them to a table that Jake deems somehow better. It's in the front of the restaurant. So they're sitting there. They order drinks. They order appetizers. And Jake's like, I'm going to get up and go to the bathroom. And as he's in the bathroom, notices this older couple that walks in, and it's this older man that's very well dressed and this older woman that's very well dressed, and she's got all this like flashy jewelry on. Walk up to the host stand, give their name or whatever, and they don't even wait, even though there's like a massive wait for this restaurant. They just immediately start walking to a table that's very close to where Liz and Jake are sitting. And as they pass, this woman kind of gives Liz a weird look, and she clocks it because it was just like she lingered a little bit too long on Liz. Jake comes out of the bathroom, he sits down, and he's like talking to her, and then he just stops talking. He's like, oh my God, my mom is here. This was like, I about spit out my water because she's like, what do you mean your mom is here? And he's like, my mom's here. She's sitting over there. That must be her date for the night. And as he's like telling her this woman makes eye contact with him and she gets up and she walks over to the table. She starts talking to him. She's like, oh, Jake, I didn't know you were going to be at this restaurant tonight. And then she looks at Liz and she's like, and you are? So Liz feels awkward, obviously. She stands up. She tries to shake her hand. She's like, oh, hi, I'm Liz. And then she looks at Jake like, are you going to introduce us? He's not contributing to this conversation at all. He's just like sitting there smiling and sipping his water. And his mom goes, and Liz, who do you worship? She goes, I'm sorry, what? And she goes, make eye contact with me when you speak to me. She goes, I asked you a question. And Liz goes, God? And the woman goes, And she goes, okay, well, Jake, I'll talk to you later. And she walks back over to her table and sits down with this man who's supposedly her date. And after she sits back down, Jake doesn't say anything about the exchange. Like, he doesn't offer any apologies. He's not like, my mom's weird. He just starts talking about something completely related. He's like, how's your day? And Liz was like, what's with your mom? Like, she's really pretty. She's really dressed like really well. Like, what does she do? Jake just goes, oh, she just has like a stronghold over like men. Like, she just goes out with a lot of different men. I guess kind of implying that his mom's like sort of a gold digger or something. The way that he says it doesn't seem to insinuate that he's like embarrassed about it or that there's anything wrong with it. It's just like a fact. Liz was like, okay, well, do you hang out with your mom a lot? He's like, no, she's really busy with her own life. Like, I only see her like every couple weeks. And Liz is like, okay, I guess I can deal with it, even though his mom is like kind of weird. And the rest of the day goes well. Jake pays for the date. He's very charming. He's very nice. He is still flirty with everybody else around him. But at this point, I guess she's just accepted that this is part of his personality. That night, they kept going out. They were basically in an exclusive relationship at like month 2. And he just seemed very much about her. He was always complimenting her, always validating her feelings, always being great at conversation, telling her how lucky he was that he found her, how excited he was for their future together, how he thinks that she could eventually potentially be the mother of his children. Like really, really heavy, deep things, but things that she wanted. She says, looking back, she realized that he was love bombing her, but she didn't realize it at the time because he was so charming with the way that he did it. So like 3 or 4 months into their relationship, Christmas comes around and he gifts her this little tiny bag and she thinks it's jewelry because the bag is so small, and she opens it up and it's this little piece of carved bone and it's carved into like a rabbit, maybe a mouse, but it was like a tiny little animal, and around it was wrapped a piece of hair. Liz is like, what is this? And Jake's like, oh, it's like a ritual my family does when they think that they found their person, like sort of a stand-in for a promise ring. But you have to give me a piece of your hair because I have a matching one of those and I have to wrap your hair around mine. So this will keep us bonded. She said Jake was very like spiritual, so she didn't really see anything wrong with it. Like obviously she would have preferred something else, but she gives him a piece of her hair. Keep in mind, at this point, nothing else in the relationship was off besides that weird interaction with his mom. Pretty much right after the holiday, Jake started getting a little bit more controlling. Like, for example, she had this friend that she would hang out with sometimes, and her friend was single, and her friend was kind of like hooking up with a lot of guys, and Jake didn't like this friend because he thought that somehow Liz being around her meant that Liz was also cheating on him anytime she went out with her. He would always talk bad about this friend, and Liz was like, no, listen, like, she's a really good friend to me. She's always been there for me. You don't have anything to worry about. Like, I'm happy in our relationship. And he was just like, I just would prefer if you didn't hang out with her anymore. Basically told him too bad, and she continued hanging out with the friend, but every time she did, he would get like really, really upset and end up like fighting with her, stonewalling her, not talking to her until basically she apologized. Her friend ended up asking her one night to come out with her, and Liz didn't want to start a fight because they had just gotten off of like a fight. So she tells her, yeah, I'll meet up with you. And then she lies to Jake, and she's like, this was probably my mistake, but she lies to Jake and she tells him that she's going out with like a different group of friends. Well, she and this friend are out together, and he shows up at the restaurant where they're at, and he walks up to the table and he's like, how could you lie to me? I knew that you were here. And she's like, how did you know I was here? In front of her friend, he goes, I'm a warlock. He's like, haven't you noticed that everyone's attracted to me? Everyone does exactly what I tell them to do when I tell them to look me in the eye. Her friend is sitting there like, what the actual F? Liz is like, Jake, I really don't want to do this here. Like, we'll talk later. And he's like, no. And he's like, basically yelling at her at this point. So she's obviously annoyed. She tells him to go home. She's not going to engage with him anymore. And she's really considering breaking up with him over this. She apologizes to her friend. She's like, I'm so sorry. I don't know what his problem is. He used to be so sweet. Her friend's just like, yeah, I don't think you should continue with this relationship. She finishes out her night. She checks her phone. He has not texted her, but when she gets home on her porch, there is a little carved thing that she had wrapped her hair around for him, except now it's missing her hair. She calls him. She's like, obviously, if we're going to break up, like, I'm going to break up with him over the phone. And he answers and he's like, you're never going to be rid of me. I hope you know that. And he hangs up. Liz is like, whatever, freak. And she's just done with him. So they don't talk for a few weeks. And eventually she's like going through her stuff and she sees the little thing that he's given her with his hair, and she just tosses it in the trash. Like, doesn't think anything of it. She doesn't think she's ever going to talk to this man ever again. Until 2 days after that, she's getting home from work one day, and she said she was renting like one half of a duplex. So she's walking to her door, and her neighbor comes out, and her neighbor's like, oh, hey, Liz, some lady dropped this package off for you. And she gives her like a little bag, and it looks exactly like the little gift bag in which he originally gifted her, little carved bone piece with his hair around it. And she opens it up, and it's that. Obviously, it could have been a different one. She doesn't know for sure it was the same one that she had tossed. She doesn't think he rifled through her trash, but she asked her neighbor, like, who dropped this off? And the neighbor's like, oh, it was like an older lady. She was dressed very well. She had all kinds of flashy jewelry on. Liz is like, was that his mom? So she goes inside, she opens up the bag, and there's like a little note in there. And it says, you will not be done with my son until I say so. And it's signed Mommy Warlock. Then she texts Jake a picture of it, and she's like, tell your mom to stop coming over to my house. Like, how does she even know where I live? This is super weird. I don't want you to contact me again. Jake tries to call her. She declines it. He texts her back. He's like, I can explain. Like, I don't really want your explanation, whatever, blocks his number because she's just done with him at this point. And then she decides she's going to reach out to her old friend from college. That was like his mutual friend. And she was like, hey, this guy, I was just dating him. He was really weird. Like, what do you know about him? And the friend ends up saying that his mom and this guy's mom were friends, but the mom believed that she had done some kind of black magic on his mother, and like that ended the friendship. The weirdest thing she says is that she's had dreams since they broke up that his mother is standing over her while she's been sleeping. She's like, obviously this is probably all subconscious, but that's my crazy dating story.
Let's read a true and scary story. The Morgue. My name is Cassie, and this is something that happened to me, something I still can't comprehend. My uncle owns a funeral home. It's beautiful upstairs. Polished wood floors, soft music playing, and the faint smell of lilies and expensive perfume lingering in the air. Peaceful, calm, almost comforting. But downstairs, that's where the morgue is. I had helped him many times with paperwork and greeting families, but I had never gone down there. I never wanted to. Something about it always made my stomach twist. But one evening, he needed help preparing a body, and I finally worked up the courage. The air downstairs was different. Colder, thicker. The fluorescent lights flickered slightly, buzzing low above us. The room smelled of sterile chemicals and metal, and in the center of the room, on a stainless steel table, was a little girl. She couldn't have been older than 6. She looked so small, too small for that table. Her skin was pale and waxy under the harsh lighting. Her tiny hands were folded over her chest, and her dark hair was spread around her like a halo. A chill ran straight down my spine. What happened to her? I asked quietly. My uncle didn't even look up. She was hit by a car while crossing the street. I felt sick. I nodded and told him I'd grab the paperwork upstairs. The moment I stepped out of the room, I felt lighter, like I could breathe again. As I walked through the hallway toward the staircase, out of the corner of my eye, I saw her, standing at the end of the hallway, small, still, watching me. My heart stopped. I turned my head so fast my neck hurt. Nothing was there. Then I heard it. Soft giggling. High-pitched, childlike, but wrong. It echoed in the hallway like it didn't belong in the world of the living. My blood ran cold. I ran back downstairs. Tio, I whispered, trying not to panic. I just saw her in the hallway, and I heard laughing. He frowned at me. Cass, what are you talking about? I tried explaining, but saying it out loud made me sound insane. Eventually, I brushed it off. Maybe it was stress, maybe my mind was playing tricks on me. Then he told me he needed to step out and asked if I could stay and finish applying her makeup. The second he left, the room felt heavier. I stood over the little girl, holding the photo we were using as a reference. In the picture, she was smiling, bright, alive, and full of warmth. Nothing like the still figure in front of me. As I worked, I felt it, that unmistakable feeling, like someone was standing right behind me, watching. I ignored it, then I heard it again. The giggling, closer this time. Not echoing, but right behind me. My hands froze. My heart pounded so hard I could hear it in my ears. I slowly turned around. Nothing. The room was empty. Then the heavy morgue door, a door that takes actual effort to move, suddenly slammed shut. The sound exploded through the room. I screamed. My uncle rushed back in, startled. I asked him if that had ever happened before. He shrugged casually. Many times. My stomach dropped. What do you mean, many times? He just gave me a look like it was normal. We finished up in silence. As I walked up the stairs, I felt that same presence behind me. Then, tiny footsteps, quick and light right at my heels. I didn't look back. I ran. Halfway up the stairs, the giggling started again. Louder, almost excited. Tio, you don't hear that? I yelled. He paused, and this time he nodded slowly. Yeah, he said. My blood turned to ice. What is it? I asked. He gave a small, strange smile. She probably just wants to play. I didn't laugh. That night at home, it didn't stop. I felt cold fingers brush past me in the hallway. I heard faint giggles when my house was completely silent. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw her standing at the end of that morgue hallway, watching. It continued until the day after her funeral. The moment she was laid to rest, everything stopped. No giggling, no footsteps, no presence. When I told my uncle, he nodded like it made perfect sense. Sometimes, he said quietly, they don't know they're gone yet. I never went back down to the morgue again. I have many more stories that have happened to me, but this one absolutely scared the living hell out of me. I always like stories when the ghosts are playful and fun and nice because you know that, like, this little girl was just like her Tio said, probably just trying to play. And the fact that your Tio was so nonchalant and was like, it happens, she probably just wants to play, like almost as if he's experienced these things before. Like I'm sure he's had so many experiences with ghosts at the morgue. Thank you, Cassie, for sending this one in. This one was spooky and also pretty sad. I feel like when it comes to like children ghosts, it always gives me such a sad feeling knowing that they probably don't understand that they've passed on until, like her Tio said, they're actually laid to rest. If you guys have any stories you'd like me to read, please email them to me and I will get to them if I can, and I will see you in the next one.
You know, staying at home and not giving a shit about what's happening outside is low-key one of the best things that you can do. If you're like, bro, that's so wrong why you're saying that, well, listen to this story. It all started in 1925 with this guy right here, Percy Fawcett. You see, Fawcett was one of the biggest and most known geographers around that time, okay? So one day he stumbled across a book called Manuscript 512. This is what the manuscript looks like, and I know it doesn't look very exciting, but we don't care about the looks, we want to see what's inside. This thing was written by a Portuguese explorer back in 1753, okay? And it was talking about a lost city that is potentially full of gold. So when Fawcett saw this, he locked in, okay? You know how some people lock in when it comes to ranking the baddest girls in school? Well, that was the type of locking in we're talking about. When Fawcett saw this, he dedicated his whole life to it. Now, after reading the manuscript multiple times, doing the analysis and all that, his theory was that there is a city in the middle of the Amazonian forest that's so advanced we don't even know about. He decided to call it the Lost City of Z. Now, here comes the part that explains why I told you in the beginning that staying in your house is low-key better for you. You see, in April 20, him, his son, and his son's friends decided to find it. Yes, only 3 people go into the other side of the world in the most dangerous forest in the world looking for a city that probably don't even exist. And just before leaving, Fawcett told something really important to everyone. He told them that if we don't come back, don't send rescue parties, it's too dangerous. Meaning that if they don't come back or, send a message, that means that Fawcett and his team are already unalive. They're no longer with us and there is no need to come and look for them. After a while, Fawcett made it to a place called the Green Hell. The name alone tells you how dangerous this place is. This is where he sent a letter saying our Indian guides are getting nervous. You need have no fear of any failure. And ladies and gentlemen, that was the last letter that he ever wrote. Because after that, they disappeared and they were never found again. And despite him not wanting people to send rescue parties because it's too dangerous, they did. And around 100 people got unalived trying to look for him. Many years later, and we still don't know what exactly happened. Did he find the lost city of Z? And most importantly, what happened to the guy? Many people assume that the man got simply slimed when he set foot there, either by the tribes or by the animals. But there were some rumors here and there that Fawcett really found the secret city and he decided to stay there. Because some explorers reported later seeing Indians with blue eyes. And guess who had blue eyes? Yes, Fawcett. So if you do the math and the math is mathing, if they had blue eyes and Fawcett had blue eyes, so Fawcett found something better than the lost city of Z. But hey, that's just a rumor.
Oh my gosh, this story really creeps me out. So this guy tells this story from when he was about 12 years old. His mom had to go away on a trip for a few days and she left him home alone. He said that he had family close by, so back in that time it really wasn't that big of a deal. I guess times were different back then because I could never. He also said that she had refused to let him have a mobile phone as she should be able to just get a hold of him on the landline. Okay, so she tells him the date in which she should be returning, and that's that. So that day rolls around, and he is upstairs in his room. All of a sudden, he hears the sound of his mother banging on the door downstairs and calling his name. He said his dog, who absolutely loved her, jumped up and ran down the steps to greet her. So he kind of comes out of his room and is standing at the top of the steps, and he sees the dog run down to the door, immediately freak out, turn around and beam right back upstairs to him. So red flags are definitely being raised and he refuses to go downstairs and open the door. So the knocking and the calling his name continues until the phone rings. So as soon as the phone starts ringing, the door knocking stops and he goes and answers the phone from upstairs. And guys, it was his freaking mother saying, "Hey, I'm really sorry I'm not there yet. I have to stay another day, but I'll be home tomorrow." Oh my goodness, that is so freaking creepy. I wonder what would have happened had he answered the door. Let me know what your thoughts are in the comments. What the heck could this have been? And if you're new here, definitely follow for more creepy story time.
Weird Spooky Watsonville. Hello, I thought I'd share my son's experience. When he was about 3 or 4 years old, I heard him talking and playing with someone. At first, I assumed it was him using his imagination until he started saying things like, "Stop, you're not supposed to play like that. It hurts." So I started paying attention to his conversations and realized it wasn't just his imagination. I asked him who he was talking to, and he said, "My friend." I asked who his friend was, and he responded with a little frustrated and said, "She sits on the bed and waits for me to wake up so we can play." At that point, I was scared. I told him not to play with her, and we prayed for her and lit a candle for her. He continued to see her and play with her. Some time went by, and he started seeing the entire family, a mom, a grandma, and a little brother. From what he shared, the mom would chase him and was mean to him. He said she grabbed him by the arm several times. The little girl shared that the dad had done something to them. This went on for over a year. My son was scared of the mom because she was mean to him. He said the mom eventually apologized for being mean to him, and after that, he didn't see them anymore. I forgot a detail when this first started. I want to say a few weeks after he mentioned she would sit on our bed, we were getting ready to leave. My bedroom window faced the road and the front of the house. I was waiting for him to get his shoes on when I heard someone humming. His dad was standing at the door. I looked out the window and asked his dad if he heard that. I assumed it was someone walking by, but no one was walking by the house. When we got out the door, I asked his dad if he heard what I did, and he said, "Yeah, someone was humming." My son still remembers this happening. He doesn't like to talk about it. We lived in a Victorian home. There are a few more stories of experiences other family members had while we lived there. So I asked her if when she moved away that if this followed her anywhere. She said no, it only happened in that home, which tells me that this is some kind of poltergeist activity that happened in the home. And then she mentioned something about like the dad had done something bad to them. So there's definitely like some kind of trauma holding that energy or those spirits there. I'm really sad that it got physical with her son, but it also makes me kind of sad about like what happened with them. And then also like the mom apologized to the little boy and then he never saw them again. It makes me wonder if one, maybe he was too scared to tell his mom that things were still happening because maybe it threatened him, or two, maybe all the praying and the lighting candles did send some light, and maybe they saw the light and the mom apologized and was able to move on. Maybe apologizing to the little boy was kind of symbolic for her soul for like apologizing to her own children about what happened. I don't know. Let me know in the comments what you guys think, or if any of you have had an experience like this, please send it my way.
Let's read a couple scary stories that were sent to us. My niece has had many paranormal interactions, so here are some of them. I'm going to call her Kate for these stories. So, Kate has 2 mirrors in her room. They don't point towards each other or her bed, but one of them is by the end of her bed. And almost every night for 2 years, she would see the top hat man at the end of her bed. One night, I was having a sleepover with her, and it was around 2:30 a.m., and I saw him staring at her while she was asleep. So I just closed my eyes and didn't look at him and eventually went back to sleep. One night that she saw him, she also saw wet footprints leading away from her side of the bed. She also had this face that she would see in the corner of her room, staring down at her, and she would just feel dread every time she saw it. Another time, Kate was sitting on her bed on her phone with her elbows touching her mattress, and she felt a sharp pain in her left elbow as if something had bit her. She asked her friend, who was a witch, about it, and she said that the top hat man or one of the other entities in her room were trying to get her attention. It left a mouth-sized bruise on her elbow. Since all of these incidents, her mom has had the house blessed, and nothing else has happened since. Oh, I should mention, Kate lives within 45 minutes of Skiggly Wiggly Ranch. Well, there is your problem. Also, I don't know who the top hat man is. Let's look up the top hat man. A widely reported shadowy humanoid figure, often appearing during sleep paralysis, characterized as a dark 6-foot-tall silhouette wearing a wide-brimmed hat. That is terrifying. We were on holiday in France at the time, staying in an Airbnb. We stayed in this pretty quiet area near Disneyland, which was where we were going. It was dark out and my parents were not home as they had left to go grab food for dinner, and since the only supermarkets nearby were in a massive mall, they were gone for a while. The Airbnb was a hotel type of building with many rooms on each floor. We were in a room at the end of the hallway. Me and my siblings were around 11 to 16 years old, and there were 4 of us. And naturally, after a day of walking around the city, our parents left us at the Airbnb while they grabbed food quickly. Now this is where things get creepy. We were all in different rooms when there was a frantic knock at the door. At first, I thought it was my dad messing around as he had knocked the same way previously. This building was pretty old and didn't have a doorbell, may I add. So, me being the oldest, I was the one to go check the door. I looked through the peephole and weirdly enough, I didn't see anyone there. I thought I may have heard another person knocking at someone else's door, or maybe someone was playing a prank. So I went back to the living room and was watching TV for a while when my sister came running to me saying she was looking through the peephole, just playing around pretending to be a spy, when she saw someone leave the elevator. She was crying when she explained she saw a person, only not a person. She said it was tall, too tall, and that it was very thin and just so strange. I tried calming her down, saying she must just be paranoid. Other people live on this floor. It must have been someone who lives here, and that her parents would be home soon. Now, she agreed with me, and I think she was too scared to imagine that it could have been something else. She didn't leave me, and we just watched TV when I heard, "May, we're home. Can you open the door?" May is my name, and the voice was my father's voice, so I naturally went to the door. I looked in the peephole and saw the same looking person my sister had explained earlier. I was terrified and immediately called my parents asking where they were, as I had heard my dad's voice and there was someone staring at our door from down the hallway. They came home as fast as they could and were panicking since we had no adults with us. I don't know what that thing was, whether it was a mimic or just a creature trying to lure us into opening the door or what, but we haven't been back there since, and I still have nightmares about what could have happened if I had opened the door. I would love it if people from France would leave me a comment. Do y'all have mimics and like skiggly wigglies out there? What is like the folklore in France, you know? I would love to know. Let's talk about living in a simulation. Okay, so I just went to Reddit and I typed in like real simulation stories, and I found this thread. What are some experiences you've had that make you believe we might be living in a simulation? So let's read some of the comments and see what people have to say. Precognitive dreams, synchronicities, especially the ones where I'm thinking to myself and I say a specific word in a sentence in my head, and a second or two later I hear or see it somewhere in the world. The radio, a video, billboard. It happens often and the words are specific. Okay, we talked about this in the conspiracy theory videos. Like, we know the phone can hear you. Like, we talk about things and then the phone will start like showing us ads and stuff. But a lot of people say, and this has happened to me too, that they'll just be thinking about something and then it'll like appear in an ad somewhere. That's freaking weird. I live on a small, quiet road and I never see or hear anyone walking or driving on it. Then the minute I try to go anywhere from my house, there are endless cars turning onto the road. People walking their dogs, mailmen showing up, the electric company fixing a line, etc. Okay, this is so true. Like, I live kind of far out and I swear there is never anybody driving down my road. And the second like I sit down to like record my podcast, or the second I go outside to walk my dog, there's all of a sudden people everywhere, cars everywhere. And someone left a comment saying, I feel like 95% of the time when I'm eating out, I walk into an empty restaurant and by the time I'm leaving, there's a line out the door. That always happens to me too. That's weird. Okay, this one's interesting. One time I was driving down a forest road. I drive down several times a week, daytime and nighttime. It was dark, and for some reason, I was driving slower than usual. My partner asked why, and I said, I don't know, I just really don't want to hit a badger. Now, keep in mind, I've never seen a badger in person. They're really quite elusive around here. I just had a sense that I didn't want to hit specifically a badger, not a fox. Plenty common here, not a hedgehog, a badger. Well, lo and behold, a few minutes after this, a badger wandered out in front of my car, and I was driving slow enough that I had plenty of time to stop and let it cross. Never seen a badger since. Maybe it was like the badger gods, sending this person a signal to slow down so they don't hit a badger. I have a mirror on the opposite side of my bed, and as I sat down and placed my drink onto the bedside table, out of the corner of my eye, my reflection was still facing the mirror as opposed to reaching over sideways. Hell no. That's never happened to me, but sometimes I do be looking at the mirror to make sure that it's like going the same way I am. I have a mirror right here. I do be looking, and that would scare the shit out of me if that happened. One time I was walking downtown and saw a minor car wreck happen right in front of me. A Subaru got its side panel crushed in pretty good. I forgot about it. Then about 3 years later, I'm walking in a completely different part of town, and for no reason, I start thinking about that Subaru that got hit. About 20 seconds after I start thinking about it, it came around the corner. Same car with the same damage I had seen happen 3 years earlier. Okay, so did they like never get their car fixed? Or is it all fake and a simulation? Me thinking about someone I haven't seen in ages. Next thing you know, they reappear in my life within 24 hours. This is not a one-time thing, at least 10 times throughout my lifetime. Okay, that has happened to me so many times too. That is so weird. Worked with special needs kids for about a decade. Show up to work one day, greet one of the clients, and he tells me to shut the hell up and leave him alone, or he is going to throw beers at me from the roof of my apartment, which was exactly how my dream from the night before had ended. I freaked out a bit after that. Spent the next decade in denial. Now I'm mature enough to admit we don't know shit about fuck. That is so true. We don't know anything. Leave a comment if you've ever experienced something that made you think we're living in a simulation.
Weird spooky story time, and this happened in Albuquerque, New Mexico. It was early spring in 2013, and at the time I was just getting into the paranormal. Less than 5 years investigating, and only spirits, nothing more. I didn't know what black-eyed kids were. I ended up getting a phone call from a friend asking me to help him with his race truck for 2 weekend races, one in Farmington, New Mexico, and the next weekend in Amarillo, Texas. We were in between races at a truck stop, and I was randomly working on the truck during the day. It was Thursday night, and we were leaving the next morning. The truck stop got eerie, calm, still, really quiet, really dark, but with an almost anxious energy. My friend went into the truck stop to shower, and I was sitting in the front seat watching the world around me because I felt hunted. It was about 11:30 p.m. and nothing was moving. I kept checking the mirrors, feeling like I was being watched, but I couldn't spot anyone. Clear up front, clear in all the mirrors, we were out at a distance and surrounded by nothing, so no one was going to sneak up. Then someone knocked on my door. I was honestly surprised and jumped. Looking out of the window, it was 2 teenagers, a girl and a boy. The girl was probably 11 to 13 and the boy 15 to 17. They were looking down and I couldn't see their faces. Both were in jeans. The girl was wearing a white top and the boy was wearing a black hoodie. I said, "Wrong truck," and the male replied, "Can you help me?" So I asked, "What can I do you for?" He said, "Can we come in?" I told him we were an active race team and if he wanted autographs or pictures to come back during daylight and I would introduce them to the driver. At this point, I don't know why, but every hair on my body rose and I felt like I was in a ton of danger. The boy just said again, "Can we come in?" That's when I noticed his voice was monotone and all the lights at the truck stop seemed to dim. Everyone froze. This interaction was the only thing happening. I reached down to my right where I had a pistol. He couldn't see me reaching because of the angles, but he said, "You don't have to be scared of us." I asked him, "What do you want?" And he told me, "I just want to come in." Then he looked at me. This is when I first saw his face. He was an African American kid, but washed out, pale, sick looking, jet black eyes. Nothing striking, extremely ordinary, almost fake, but his eyes. And the world froze. It felt like he was reading my thoughts. I could hear his voice say, "You don't have to be afraid. You need to let us in." Inside my head, it felt like we were locked in a staring match for an eternity. When I finally was able to break out of it, I turned and grabbed my pistol, only to turn to where the kids were, and they were gone. There was no way they could have run without me seeing them. It was a split second. In a panic, I started looking around thinking I was under some sort of attack, but I didn't unlock the truck. I didn't leave the truck, just looking. Slowly, I noticed the lights of the truck stop brightening. The anxiety lowered. Chaos turned to the truck stop. Soon after, my friend came back from his shower and I asked him why he took so long. He'd been gone for hours. He looked at me confused and said, "I took a 15-minute shower. I've been gone for 20 minutes." I asked him if he noticed the lights dimming at the truck stop, and he said no. It was super busy, with a lot of people coming in and out, but I looked like I had seen God himself. For weeks after, I dreamt of those kids. They were everywhere. They were trying to get into my house, my car. If I had a dream about camping, they would show up in my dream asking to come into my tent. After this experience, I noticed the hauntings I started dealing with were darker, angrier, even demonic. And somehow they all knew who I was. Like I had a beacon placed on me to attract weird shit. Ghost hunting went from a hobby to a crash course in darkness. That's when I realized that if it was happening to me, it was happening to others. And I wanted to help. I learned demonology from a reputable demonologist. I studied, I learned, I offered all my knowledge to help others. No money needed, no fame needed, real help. I think after years of thinking about it and seeing other things, I believe they are some sort of demonic entity. Even a demonic entity cannot enter you without permission. Basically, they harass you, break you down, and convince you to let them in, one way or another. I have wanted a Black Eyed Kid story for so long. I hear so many people with Black Eyed Kid stories, and they are so creepy and they're so common, and no one knows what they are, why they come, and why they always ask to come in. And if you don't let them in, they get persistent or just go away. Super creepy. If anyone else has had a Black Eyed Kid story, please send it my way.
Hello and welcome back to a series of spooky stories, The Haunted Tea Spill. This series is brought to you by all things spooky and ungodly amounts of paranormal activity. We're already halfway through February, so March is Women's History Month, and I've been wanting to do this for a couple of months now. Any commission that I make off of this necklace from now till the end of March, I'm going to be donating that here. That website will also be accessible on my page if you want to just donate directly. Now onto the story. This happened almost 2 decades ago. I'm pushing 30, and I still remember it very vividly to this day. For context, my older sister and I were removed from my mother's care when I was 4, and she was 14 to live with my dad's sister, who had 3 girls of her own. When my sister and I moved in, the dynamic and energy shifted in the house, and being young and sensitive to the environment shifts made me uneasy, because at my big age of 4, I didn't like feeling everything all at once. At my big age of 33, I don't like feeling anything. So I can empathize with your 4-year-old self. One night I wake up out of a dead sleep to someone nudging my leg. I assumed that it was my sister, but when I opened my eyes, I saw a really pale girl who had an old-timey dress. That's gonna send me to the fucking moon every time. She looked like a porcelain doll come to life, but something told me not to scream. In hindsight, I should have. Even fucking creepier, because porcelain dolls are terrifying. She stated her name was Victoria. Bitch, you have got to be fucking kidding me. She looked like a fucking porcelain doll come to life in an old-timey dress and her name was Victoria? She was looking for a friend, and as a child with fresh abandonment issues, I didn't refuse her offer to play. Damn. She giggled and looked at me dead in my eyes and said, "I have a game we can play. All of my friends enjoy." This heifer proceeded to lean down to my sister's foot and began tickling her in her sleep. And of course she moves, but she stays asleep. That upset Victoria, and then she bit my sister on her foot. Victoria, what the fuck, girl? My sister woke up screaming, rightfully so, and accused me of biting her. Also rightfully so, because who the fuck is going to automatically assume that it's like some porcelain doll come to life in some scary old-timey dress named Victoria? You know? I tell her, no, it was Victoria, and the color drained out of my sister's face. She asked me to explain, and so I tell her every bit of what happened all the way up to when she woke up. As it turns out, in her dream she happened to be wandering in a forest and ran into a girl, you guessed it, named Victoria. She was crying that she had lost her friend that she had entered the woods with and asked my sister to help her find the friend. When she had woken up, she said at that moment in her dream a copperhead snake had bitten her foot. The same foot I saw Victoria bite. We said a few prayers and went back to bed like nothing happened. I have more somewhat creepy stories, but that one still makes me uncomfortable. As it should, because that's fucking creepy. I don't like that. I don't like that at all. She was fucking with y'all both at the same time. and neither one of you knew. Yikes on bikes, bitch. Rated on a scale of 1 to 10, 1 being really scary, creepy, spooky, 10 being the most. If you have a story of your own that you want to submit, you can do so on the link tree in my profile. I will see y'all at the next episode. Stay spooky, friends.
Here are more reasons why the San Fernando Valley is considered to be one of the most haunted pockets in and around Los Angeles. Now, there is this one place that I actually remember seeing a documentary that it covered in the 90s in Granada Hills. You see, Granada Hills was home to a community hospital that no longer stands. And if you're saying Granada Hills Community Hospital is the hospital you're talking about, Tammy, then you're absolutely correct. This hospital was so haunted that it actually was featured in this documentary, The Ghosts of Moore Park and Granada Hills. So let's go into the history, the tragic history, and the haunted history of Granada Hills Community Hospital. Built in the 1960s during the Valley's rapid suburban expansion, Granada Hills Community Hospital served generations of families in Granada Hills. It was a place where many babies were born, where people actually took their last final breaths, and where nurses actually walked up and down the fluorescent hallways of this hospital. Now, this hospital went through many stages, and it would actually go through one of its most triumphant stages in 1994. You see, it was one of the only hospitals standing that wasn't affected by the 1994 Northridge earthquake. And it actually opened its entire parking lot, creating a triage for those who were injured during that time. But as the story goes with small community hospitals, with the ever so changing healthcare system and the financial strain, it would close its doors in early 2000s. Now, even though the empty corridors were left dark and desolate and the parking lot was finally empty, the one thing that still lingered around were the ghost stories. You see, in the early 90s, there was a little documentary called The Ghost of Moore Park, Granada Hills, and Northridge. And there was a gentleman by the name of Daniel Hobbit. I don't know why, but this guy gives me San Fernando Valley, Kenny Rogers vibes. But this guy had a video camera, right? And he was known to be the paranormal cameraman of this time, of this area. So he was invited to come into the Granada Hills Community Hospital to interview some of the nurses for this documentary and the patients. Now, based on many of the nurses' accounts, primarily in the hospice unit, many nurses would state that they would hear echoes and footsteps down empty hallways and rooms that were not occupied. But most importantly, the most common occurrence that would happen, especially with the nurses in this unit, is that their clipboards would fly out of their hands without any rhyme or reason. Patients would also see weird anomalies in their rooms. They would see weird balls of lights and even shadow figures. But there was this one particular room in this hospital that was notorious for a shadow figure. And that's where Daniel Hobbit grabs his video camera, leaves it running in that room, and this is what he picks up. He picks up an image, an actual humanoid image. Here's the actual footage of what he collected.
There on the tape, an amorphous thing appeared, resembling a soft, shimmering glow that suddenly, without warning, turned into a human face.
Dan said, "Oh my God, look at this. Either I'm crazy or that's a face."
It was a face that seemed to come out of nowhere. It started off as a little ball of light and materialized into what seemed to be the features of a man.
I mean, that is really creepy. Thank you, San Fernando, Kenny Rogers. But it was actually what was built over the hospital. You see, the hospital was torn down, and now it's a location of a school. So I'm very curious if this school that is located in the same exact location where this hospital stood actually has activity of their own. For those of you who grew up in and around the area, do you remember Granada Hills Community Hospital? Let me know in the comments. Let me know if you heard any of the ghost stories or if you had family members that worked here and had stories of their own. And always remember to stay haunted and weird.
There's something definitely going on at Yosemite. Now, out of all the parks I've been to, it is by far the creepiest. There was this man named Tom. Tom and his friend Benny, they decided they were going to go hiking in northern Yosemite, which happens to be the most remote part of the park. Now, they set off on this 10-mile hike, and they got to about the 4-mile marker when Benny had to use the restroom. So he goes off the trail into the woods, and Tom waits for him. Well, 5 minutes pass, Benny doesn't return. 10 minutes pass, he still doesn't return. 15 minutes pass, and he still hasn't come back. So Tom's like, maybe I should go check on him, like something might be wrong. So he heads off the trail and he goes into the woods, into the direction Benny went. As he's walking through the woods, he's yelling, "Benny, Benny, where are you?" And he doesn't hear anything. But that's when he realized, like, he didn't hear the birds chirping. He didn't hear any insects. It was completely quiet. Then he hears Benny's voice say, "I'm over here." So he goes in that direction and he follows the sound of Benny's voice. But then he comes out to the spot and he sees Benny is on the ground. Something has attacked him and he is not moving. But he still hears Benny talking. And when he looks up and over in front of him, he sees this very large man that he described had the face of a deer, but it was human. He said he took off running as fast as he could through the woods. This thing began to chase him. He would go one way and this thing would be in front of him. He would go the other way and it would still be in front of him. He could not get away from it. Eventually, he makes it back to the trail. And as he's running along this trail, he smacks into someone. And as he looks up, it's Benny. And he goes, "Hey, Benny, like, what happened to you? Where'd you go? Like, are you okay? Are you hurt?" And Benny's like, "Well, after I went into the woods to use the restroom, I heard you calling my name, telling me to follow you. So I went in that direction, and I ended up here." So he tells Benny, he says, "That wasn't me. We need to leave now." So they take off running as fast as they can, and they make it back off the trail. And as they are leaving this section of the park, they could hear these loud screams coming from behind them. Do you ever get that feeling at night like you're being watched? You look out the window and you see a strange star and it makes you feel uncomfortable and you don't really know why. If so, you are not alone. Thousands of people every year report having this strange feeling that they are being watched by the stars. But are the stars alive? Do they have a conscience? Could they be watching us? Now, there was this man named Gary. Gary and his wife lived outside of El Paso, Texas. And he said him and his wife had been together for about 20 plus years. His wife never had any problems sleeping at night. She never slept walk. She never had any issues. She would sleep through the night. But he said one night that changed. His wife was at this dinner with some friends. And she comes in the door. She's frantic. She's scared. She says, "Something weird happened to me." And Gary goes, "What happened?" She says, "As I was driving home, I seen this strange star in the sky, and it was following the car." She said the star was moving, and I got this feeling of dread, like something was wrong. She said, so I continued to speed home, and this star just seemed like it was continuously following me. And she said, I don't know, when I got to the house, I felt really scared, really uneasy, and so I just ran inside because I felt like it was going to get me. So Gary's like, that's kind of weird. He goes outside, and he looks up in the sky, and sure enough, he sees this strange, bright star just kind of hovering above the house. So it kind of gives him a creeped out feeling. He goes back inside, and later that night, they go to bed. Well, in the middle of the night, Gary hears his wife get out of bed, and he thinks maybe she's going to use the restroom. But soon he hears the front door open, and he thinks, where is she going this late at night? So he gets up out of bed, and he follows her, and he sees she's going out into the middle of this field. She gets probably a couple 100 feet out into this field when he finally catches up to her. Said she just stops, is completely still. Her head just whips up, looking up into the sky. And she started to speak in a language he had never heard before. And he said, just like that, she snapped out of it. She turned around and she said, oh, Gary, like, what am I doing outside? How did I get out here? And Gary said, I'm trying to figure that out myself. Like, you just walked outside. And they both attributed to the fact that maybe she was just sleepwalking. A couple weeks later, Gary, once again, is asleep in bed with his wife. He wakes up, and when he looks over, his wife is gone. So he gets up, he frantically starts searching around the house, finds the front door open again. So he goes outside into that field, and he starts looking all over for her, but he doesn't see her. And that's when he started to get this uneasy feeling. And he said when he looked up, he sees that strange star again. And he said this thing just kind of hovered off over into the horizon. And so he ran back inside. He looks all over for his wife. He can't find her. And still to this day, his wife has disappeared, and he has no idea what happened to her, where she went, and he thinks that whatever happened to her had something to do with that star in the sky. There was this man named Jonathan. Now, Jonathan said when he was younger, he would go and visit his grandfather who lived in Louisiana on the Bayou. Now, his grandfather had lived his whole life right on this sort of waterway that was known to be haunted. Now, he said this particular summer, he went to his grandfather's house and he was going to stay for a week. So he gets to his grandfather's house and his grandfather greets him and is so excited and is like, welcome, Jonathan, come on in and let me get you something to eat. Well, the first thing he noticed when he goes into his grandfather's house is there is this stench of something that is rotting. So he says, grandfather, like, what is that smell? Like, why does it smell like, something is rotting? And his grandfather says, oh, it's nothing, don't worry. So he thinks, oh, that was kind of odd. He also noticed one of the rooms in the house was like boarded up. And he said, grandfather, why do you have that door closed? And he goes, oh, I'm doing some repairs in that room. I just didn't want you to go in there and get hurt. So they start, talking, having a good time. And then nightfall came. And Jonathan said as soon as it got dark, his grandfather started getting really anxious and antsy. And his grandfather told him, I want you to go in your bedroom and you lock the door and go to bed. And he's like, but grandfather, I thought we could stay up late and, tell stories and stuff. And his grandfather's like, no, go into your bedroom and lock the door. So he goes into the bedroom and he notices that his grandfather has put, this deadbolt lock on the door. So he locks the door and he lays down. Later that night, he hears kind of like a very loud ruckus coming from outside the room. And then he hears the front door open. And after that, everything was quiet. He goes to bed. The next morning, his grandfather comes inside the door and he's like, grandfather, where were you last night? And he said, oh, nowhere. It's okay. Everything's all right. Don't worry. And he said, well, why were you so nervous last night and made me lock my door? And his grandfather said, oh, just precautionary. So he said, every night he was there at his grandfather's, his grandfather would leave in the middle of the night and then come back in the morning. Well, the last day he is there, he goes into the bedroom, locks the door for the night, and he starts hearing that sound, like a ruckus sound coming from outside the room. This time, however, he unlocks his door, he goes out of the room. And over in the kitchen, he can see someone moving around kind of really violently, and he hears all of these weird kind of gurgling sounds. And when he gets a better look at what is in this kitchen, he said it was this, muscular middle-aged man, but he had the face of what looked like a wolf. And he said this thing just noticed him and it started growling at him and snarling. It walks towards him and then grabs him by the arm. And the only thing Jonathan could think of at the time was to bite the arm of whatever this was. So he bites the arm of whatever this was and he runs into his bedroom and he locks the door. The next morning, he hears the front door open and he thinks, oh, my grandfather's home. He opens the door and he sees his grandfather coming inside. He is completely disheveled. He's not wearing a shirt. And he notices he has this bandage wrapped around his arm in the same exact spot of where he had bit that thing that he encountered the night before. So he knew at that moment that what he seen was his grandfather. And he said he believes to this day that he's seen what is known as the Rugaroo. Realize that there are wild lions that roam the woods in America. Now, at one time, 10,000 years ago, there used to be what was called the American lion. As far as scientists know, it went extinct. But there have been many reports of people saying that they've seen a very large lion-like creature in the American forest. Now, it's interesting because the other thing that most people don't realize is there are a lot of private owners who are outside of the zoo who have large cats. And from time to time, those cats escape, or sometimes they just let them loose and they run off into the woods. So, of course, there are small populations of African lions in the American wilderness. Now, there was this park ranger. They said, they were in northern Illinois. They worked at sort of this campground. And they always had 2 rangers at night that would stay overnight in this cabin. Well, about 11:30 at night, they get a phone call. One of the campers in one of the cabins said that they had heard some strange sounds outside of the area. So both the rangers get in the truck and they drive over. They then knock on the cabin door and they start talking to these campers, who go on to tell them that they are hearing sort of what sounded like a lion. And the rangers are like, we can reassure you there are no lions here in this area, nor anywhere in America. But he said that's when he turned around and he sees this very large cat. And he said it was not a cougar or a bobcat, like this was a legitimate African lion. And he said it ran across and went into this part of the woods. And he said that's when he immediately went inside the cabin with his partner and they locked the door. They called the police, who came out and actually searched the area, but they thought these people, must have been crazy or something. But he still claims to this day that he thinks there's a very large lion that lives in that area. Now, also in northern Illinois, there was a farmer who said he used to hear sort of these roars coming from the woods behind his house. And he would lose cows from time to time. And he said, it was really weird because it felt like there might have been an African lion living in the forest behind his home. So what do you think? Are there lions in America? We have a possible alien abduction encounter in California. Now, there was this man who said east of Palm Springs, he happened to be driving on the highway. Said as he was driving at night, he began to see these flashing lights behind him. At first, he thought he was getting pulled over. So he turned off on this side road and he pulled off to the corner. And as he sits there waiting in his car, no one comes. He doesn't see any other cars. And he thinks, that's weird. As he goes to put his car into drive, the electronics on his vehicle started going haywire. The radio started turning on by itself, and the lights started flashing. So at this moment, he thinks, okay, something's wrong with the battery. He goes to reach for the lever to pop the hood, and that was the last thing he could remember. He said he then found himself about a mile away in the middle of the desert. He was confused. He felt sick. He had no idea what happened to him. And he had no idea where his car was at that time. And he said he had this small tear on the back of his shirt in the upper right corner. He said he thought maybe he got cut or he had a deep wound. But as he further investigated it, he could see the skin was untouched. So he made his way through the desert and he ends up finding the highway again. And he's able to determine his location. So he heads back to the last point that he remembers. And sure enough, there's his car on the side of the road. And he said as he got back into his car, he finds his phone in the passenger seat. And as he looks at the time, 3 hours had passed. He had no recollection as to what happened in those 3 hours of time. So he called tow service. And when they came, they found that his vehicle, the battery was completely drained. And still, he cannot rationalize exactly what happened to him that night. So what do you think? Was he abducted by aliens?
Not me finding scary things kids say, but in Spanish. I'm crossing my fingers and hoping that these Spanish-speaking kid stories are not as scary as the English ones. First story. I walked into my little cousin's room, and as soon as she saw me, she said, "The little girl in the mirror told me not to talk to you. If you didn't want to talk to me, you didn't have to do all that." That would have made me never talk to my little cousin again. Second story, and this is a mom and a son. And one day the son comes up to the mom and says, the little boy is asking why I don't want to play with him anymore. Obviously the mom's like, what little boy? Her son then says, the one that lives in my closet. Oh, the one that lives in your closet? Yeah, we're moving. We're fucking moving. This third story is a teacher with her preschool students. One day, one of her students comes up to her and tells her that she couldn't get any sleep because in the middle of the night, her older sister woke her up because she wanted to play the dead game. She explained that she didn't want to play with her sister because that game scares her. The teacher thought that maybe she was scared because it was nighttime in the middle of the night, but the little girl tells her that she didn't want to play the game because her sister wanted to throw her off the stairs so that she can go with grandma. Good thing she didn't play the game with her sister, but yeah, what the fuck?
Hey, listen, we don't get scared and we don't judge. Let me tell you guys a story time of when this friend of mine knew that she was going to die. So for story's sake, we're going to call this girl Sunflower because she loved sunflowers. So to give you a backstory of Sunflower, Sunflower was staying with her dad and her stepmother, and she was the firstborn of, I think, 4 kids. She was the first, and then there were 3 after her, and she was the only kid who was not birthed by that mother. So naturally that mother literally abused her. For one, Sunflower looked exactly like her mom, and the stepmother was Sunflower's mother's best friend. So you can already imagine why she was abusing him, because it's giving you look like your late mom, and I took your late mom's man, and now you're here looking like your mom, and now you're your dad's favorite, and that's a problem. So Sunflower would tell me about the abuse that she was enduring, and I would always ask her, like, why don't you tell your dad what's happening? Maybe he can help you. And she used to tell me that my dad tells me all the time, like, you need to make sure that you finish school, and once you finish school, it's going to be easy for you to go to varsity, and you're going to be far from this place. I cannot leave this woman because this woman has me tied because she has my kids. If I leave her, she's going to make it hard for me to see my kids. Mind you, Sunflower's dad knew very well that he stayed with a witch in the house. She's like, yeah, my stepmother is a witch, but she doesn't even hide it. There was a time where apparently the middleborn, right, the one before the lastborn, if you get what I mean, she apparently failed a test, and she came home and she lied because their mom was actually very strict. So she came home and she lied, and she said, the only reason why I failed the test is because my friend sabotaged me. And the mom told that girl, like, steal her book and bring it here, we'll deal with her. And I was like, yo. And Sunflower was like, yeah, this is very normalized behavior. She was like, steal her book and bring it over here. And so I think the child that took the book and she brought it to her mom. And apparently the third born is as evil as the mom, right? So she stole that kid's book and she brought it, and apparently that kid has been falling sick like nobody's business. And at some points, like, she lost her mind. Like, it's sad, but it was sad. So this was like the year of her death, right? And she used to tell me, like, I feel like I'm not gonna make it, like, to the end of this year, blah, blah. So I was like, why would you say that? Like, nothing was wrong with her, like, did your stepmom do something? She was like, no, like, I just feel it in my spirit, She's like, sometimes whenever she's walking alone, she gets this cold wave of wind, and she just gets scared, and she feels like death is calling her. And I just be like, I never really took her seriously, y'all. She got fed up and she told her teacher what was happening at home, like how she was getting abused and all of that. The teacher went to the house, and obviously the stepmother lied. The stepmother lied and the dad lied as well, because the stepmother was saying stuff and the dad was just quiet and all of that. And apparently the stepmother told the dad, if you tell these people the truth and say that we are beating this child because she's taking it as an abuse, the system is going to take the child and she's going to be under the government. So you don't want to try that. And the stepdad literally listened to the stepmom and they lied. And then she decided, since that's not going to help, she's going to go to a traditional healer and maybe she'll find answers there. Unfortunately for her, y'all, she went to a traditional healer / witch doctor that was working with the stepmom. So she was just digging a hole for herself, y'all.
goes to this traditional healer, tells this traditional healer that, hey man, listen, this mom of mine is doing this and that. And the traditional healer was like, oh, okay. And she told the traditional healer that, listen, I know what my stepmother's doing, and I'm going to tell the church what she has been doing. Like, I'm basically going to expose her. Traditional healer obviously tries to do some damage control, gives her stuff to bath with and drink and dala adi dingers, and she does exactly that. And within a week, guys, I think it was around September when all of this happened, and she just fell sick within a week, y'all. Like, I don't know what was going on with that girl. She couldn't walk, she couldn't talk. She was just always like, she was thin as hell as well. And I remember I asked this girl, like, what is going on, bro? Are you okay? Like, what should we do? Like, what can I help you with? She's like, she doesn't know either because they're refusing to take her to the hospital, so she's just gonna chill, y'all. And I literally had a dream the day she passed away. I had a dream of her mom, right? I knew it was her mom because like I said, I didn't know her mom because her mom died at birth, remember? But I knew that was my friend, that was Sunflower's mom, because Sunflower looks exactly like her mom. She showed me pictures before, right? And in this dream, like, this woman comes to me and she's like, my daughter's about to join me, but I can't find her spirit. And I'm like, girl, what are you talking about? And she was like, I'm looking for my daughter, guys. She was hysterical in this dream. She was looking for her child. And then she stands with me. We start running, and then she starts running, and I'm like chase after her, right? And then eventually she stops me, and then she hides me. And then we see this dark area, and we see Sunflower kneeling down, and the stepmother feeding something to her in her, like giving something to her in a spoon, and she's feeding it to her, and Sunflower and she's shouting at her like, swallow it, and she's hitting her or whatever. And then all of a sudden Sunflower disappears, and she starts looking around and she starts screaming. And then the stepmother looks at the mom and is like, you did this. And then she starts chasing us, and the mom is like, run, I'm there, I'm running, whatever. And then as I'm running, she almost caught me, and I opened my eyes. And as soon as I opened my eyes, 5 or 10 minutes later, I found out that Sunflower had passed away. She was in the hospital, and she passed away from a stomach bug or something like that. Like, she had a stomach virus, something along those lines. And yeah. And when I found out, I was devastated. The funeral went on, and that was that. Until date, the stepmother never looks at me in the eyes, like, never. Every single time I see her, I've even gotten to a point where I don't beat her anymore, because now I'm old enough and I understand, like, what you did, And now I can see the face, the face of guilt, I can see guilt in her face, so I don't really talk to her. Like, I just always look at her, and she just never looks at me for some reason. And it's crazy, y'all. It's crazy, but it is what it is. So, yeah. Just evil. As for the dad, he is still with the stepmother, and they're raising their kids. He was really sad, during the funeral and all of that. And it's like, and Sunflower once told me that, his mom, like, so he heard this from, like, Sunflower heard this from her aunt, that the mom used to warn, like, the dad about this particular friend, because they started this whole entire affair way before Sunflower was born. And she would tell him, like, stop hanging around this girl, like, she's not okay, she's not right. Like, her and her mom practice witchcraft, and he didn't believe. Now he's suffering the consequences. Sometimes you guys need to listen, hey?
You can't make this stuff up. Might have known the story of real life boogeyman.
Hey guys, it's your girl Jayla, back with another scary story coming from the Avalanche Mountains. So crazy, because I didn't even know that I was only an hour and 30 minutes away from the Avalanche Mountains. I have a whole bunch of cousins that live out there. I'm gonna see if they have their own, like, scary stories about that area. But it's just so freaking crazy how it's going viral on TikTok, and, like, I can literally travel there if I really wanted to. So this story comes from a lady. She had just gotten out of, like, a divorce, like a nasty divorce with her now ex-husband. She mentioned that they didn't have any kids, and she obviously lived in the Avalanche Mountains. She knows the rules about the mountains, like when to answer, what not to answer, don't do these certain things. And so she's just chilling in her house, in this big house at that, by herself. So this is, like, the first time that she's actually by herself in this house.
So she gets home around 5 p.m. and before she even winds down or anything, she decides that she's gonna let her pets out in the backyard. She did mention that she had a cat and a dog named Tom and Jerry, like, you know, the movie. After she let them go out in the backyard, she came in, she started cleaning up, she started cooking, and then she took a shower and got ready to wind down for bed because the sun was setting. So now, again, before she goes to bed, she's letting her animals go back in the backyard to use the potty like one more time before she go to bed. And at this point, it's like really, really dark outside. The only light that she has is the light that's on her front porch or her back porch. And the light doesn't go that far. So keep that in mind. She can't really see anything. Also, to set like the mood of this, she mentioned that like it was fall and the wind was like so freaking loud. Like it was too breezy at this time of night. So now she's watching Jerry, right? And she notices that Jerry is sniffing around and he's going around this tree, like turning his head around like the perimeter of where the house is. She also mentions that while she was letting the animals do what they needed to do in the back, she still had the leash on them. So they were trying to like go see what it was that they were sniffing, but like they couldn't really go too far because she was holding on to them, but the animals were still like pulling on her. So eventually she tells Jerry that, you know, we gotta go in the house. You just came out here to use your bathroom. She's telling him like, no, come on, like don't go over there. So he comes back and they both are in the house now. But as she's winding down, getting ready to go upstairs and lay in her bed, she closes the curtain. She hears like a small tap on the window. So she's thinking there's nothing that can possibly be tapping on this window, but except for if like a beetle or something flew by and hit it by accident. She goes upstairs and lays in her bed, but as she's getting into her bed, she hears it like again. This time it was way louder, but it was just one tap. She's getting spooked out, but she's like, okay, I'm gonna just laugh it off. She laughs it off and she goes to lay back down, but this time she hears it again. And when she hears it again, it's 3 taps this time. It's not just one tap. And she gets up, obviously. She checks to see if there's anybody playing at the window. Nobody. But mind you, it's dark outside, so she can't really see anything. But from the looks of it, it looks like nobody is around. So now she gets out of bed and she's like crouching to see if she hears and sees anything, right? The dogs get on the bed and they start barking and looking at the same window that she was hearing the tapping noises on. So now, instead of hearing the tapping on the windows, she hears the tapping coming from the back door where she let the dog go use the bathroom. So now her and all the animals get up to go to the door to scope the scenery out without opening the door. Now she knows the rules of the Avalanche Mountains and she knows like don't open the door for nobody that you know is not there. Even if you're hearing noises and all that, she knows the rules, right? So she has like a little bit of glass on at the top of her door, but she has curtains covering it, but the curtains are not long enough to the point where she can't like see through the cracks of it. So she's looking and obviously she doesn't see nothing, right? So this freaks her out to the point where she doesn't even want to be here by herself. So she gets her stuff ready. She runs to the garage. She opens the garage. You know, it's opening pretty slowly at this point in time that she is like terrified. And she whips the car out, whips it and turns it, and she tries to leave the property, right? When she whips the car, the lights on her car, like the headlights, are pointed at exactly the same tree it was that the dog was trying to peek over and see if they seen anybody. And just wait for this next part. This next part, she says that when she's driving off, she sees something standing next to that same tree. What is standing next to that same tree is a tall, gray creature just standing there with glowing eyes, with long fingers and long arms and long legs. To me, that sounds like an alien. It doesn't even sound like something paranormal. It sounds like a alien. And to make it a little bit more scary and for y'all to picture it better, she said that she could only see the right side of this thing's body because the left side of it was creeping behind the tree. As she leaves the property of like the house and stuff like that, down the road somewhere, her ex-in-law's family was there. So she knocks on their door, doesn't care about what time of night it is, doesn't care about the fact that they're divorced. She's just asking them to like come to the house with her and see if she's tweaking, because she's like, I know I'm not tweaking, but I need like somebody here with me to check this out. So her father-in-law, her ex-father-in-law, goes to the house with her, and they're looking at everything on the property. They're turning all the lights on, scoping the scenery out, and they don't see anything. So the father-in-law offers her to stay with them for the night, and she takes that opportunity because she's like, I'm a female, I'm not staying here by myself, and I know that I'm not tweaking. So now fast forward to the next day, she goes back home and she goes to see the property and see the area where she's seen the creature at. And when she goes to the tree of where it was standing at, she sees 3 large scratch marks on the tree. So after that, she just runs back in the house and locks the doors. And I'm pretty sure it was daytime around this time, but she said nothing else happened after that for like the past 4 months, because that was the last time that she seen the creature. I feel like that story is really freaking scary, especially being that there's so many other stories about the Avalanche Mountains, and it's literally right around the corner from me, damn near. If you guys want more scary stories, true crime videos, follow me because I post those as much as possible.
I lived in a haunted French castle where our maid almost got murdered, and these are some more photos, and the last post I did was the story time. But there's always this memory of like feeling being watched. There's so many more things that happened. I couldn't find the kitchen for days. Like, I'd find it once and then I couldn't find it again for a couple hours, and I'd be walking around crying my eyes out, going outside, looking at the kitchen through the window, going in, tracing my steps, and then I literally could not find it. The first day we noticed something that was really weird is that my mom would find me like in the middle of the night outside, or I'd be up in the attic, or I'd be down in the dungeon. I literally would be everywhere except for my bed, and I was asleep, and I've never slept walk in my life, and she would find me in all these weird places just standing and staring, which was weird for me because I didn't believe it until she'd wake me up and I'd be standing outside like in the middle of the field. It was very weird. To be honest, even though this happened only like 2 years ago, I don't remember much. Like, when I look back at the photos, I remember it clear as day, but when I try to think, it's just blurry. Like, I don't remember the details.
There's a lot going on here, but where I felt immediate energy and was able to start reading some information was obviously the dungeon, and then this. So let's start with how she talked about sleepwalking into these other rooms and her mom would find her random places. I'll actually go into more detail on our Patreon page, but what was happening is female spirits in particular were entering her body and moving her around. This doesn't happen all the time, but that was happening here. Light brown hair, a white woman, but had been in a deeply abusive relationship, so a lot of physical abuse. I also feel like she was held against her will. I feel like she was manipulated to get to the castle, manipulated emotionally and verbally, and then never saw the light of day, was never freed. And people did look for her, but this castle was like off limits. I mean, I feel like there was a man in particular that went looking for her, feels like a husband, and lost his life doing it because guards soldiers. So unfortunately, this woman lived, it feels like a solid 3 to 5 years under this like abusive regime. We're going to move her over because she was entering the young girl's body and moving her around as a form of escape. She's just circling and circling and circling, fear, confusion, obviously, right? Like, I don't need to go into detail. We understand why. So let's see if we can move her over. I feel like her name's like an S, like a Susan. Why did the name Susan B. Anthony pop into my head? I mean, I've heard that name before. I don't know if it's relevant, but that name. So we'll go with, her name was Susan. We have to stop her. She's still like running, trying to get out. I'm having a hard time stopping her. Hold on. Now I'm trying to calm myself because I'm feeling her anxiety. And I'm just going to hold out my arms. You're welcome to join me. And remember, even if you're watching this days after or weeks or years after I post it, the work still, the energy still goes in her direction and helps with her healing, the souls, the DNA healing. So I'm just holding out my hands and I'm going to, like, it's like I'm going to catch her the next time she comes running through. Got her. So let's just let her cry it out. Again, I've said this before, it's not a crying like you or I would do. It's an energy like releasing the memory. We're just letting her let go of the memory so she can stop the cycle she's in. She's collapsing, which is good. It means she's letting go. Just let her have this moment a little bit longer. I'm not going to communicate too much with her because she's very, very vulnerable. So I just allow her to see her guides. I'm stepping away so that her guides, I don't interfere with this process. So just allow her. So I'm just seeing her laying like in a ball, sobbing, but slowly slowing down that sobbing and allowing her to see and look up, not bury her head. I want her to see the guides that are always there. They're just waiting for her to be ready, and they're reaching like up underneath her and holding her like this and lifting her up. Okay, and then there's another woman that's there. This is like a Betty, Barbara, a B name. Same situation, only she was hired help. She's a woman of color. And so she was enduring a lot of suffering. She was enslaved. She was there. She didn't have any way of leaving, even if she wanted to. And so we're going to work with her to heal that. She is not stuck as much as she is in defiance. She's very, very strong and they're in defiance. Like, she is not going to let this happen again. This is a woman, a spirit that we want to work with, that we want to call on. I particularly look to women of color and say, look to her. Her name starts with a B. So whatever you feel her name to be, you will hear it, you will feel it. Call on her because she is in defiance. She is like here. She is not leaving. And she is like watching over not only the land, but the country. And she is there, like she is like this warrior princess.
These are lists of more spiritual signs that we shouldn't ignore. Part 4, I think. Starting off really strong with number 1 is seeing the reflection of something on like your TV screen. Like when your TV screen is off, you see a reflection of like a figure there, but when you look across from it, there's nothing there. For whatever reason, reflections are spiritual weak points. They can kind of like disappear from our visual eyes. Like they can kind of like be in front of us and we can't, I'm talking about spirits. Spirits can be in front of us and we can't see them, but for whatever reason, they can't hide from reflections. So if you see something in your TV screen when it's off, but it's not in front of you, be careful. Number 2, if you see something out of the corner of your eye and when you go to look, it's not there, that's not your imagination. You literally saw a shadow person. A lot of times they come around because they're just curious or they're bored. Other times they come around because they're trying to warn us for some impending danger or like doom. Either way, I always pray them away or I rebuke them because I don't like having any sort of negative energy around me. I feel like if you're like a dark shadow person, you don't need to be around me. So don't ever ignore whenever you see something out of the corner of your eye, because I promise you, it's not in your head.
I need to tell you guys this ghost story. This story was sent into my email, and if you have any scary stories, paranormal encounters, or ghost stories that you'd like to share, you can send them to the email in my bio. I have paraphrased the original for storytelling reasons. I lived in that house for most of my life. We don't live there anymore, but I will stand 10 toes down and say that it was haunted. One night, I had 2 friends staying over. It was late, somewhere between 1 and 3 in the morning. At some point, one of them fell asleep, so the other friend and I went downstairs to get something to eat. When we came back up, the friend had woken up again. My mom and her boyfriend were in the room next to mine. Something important to know about the house: almost everyone who lived there had seen a little girl. I never saw her myself, but everyone else did. And none of them ever said she felt evil, just present. We were all sitting in my room when suddenly one of my friends noticed red marks appearing on her legs. At first, I thought she was just messing with me. I was the youngest, so that wouldn't have been surprising. But then, the same marks started showing up on my legs. Understandably so, that's when I started to get scared. The marks weren't random. They were spelling something. They spelled out my dad's name. He had passed away some time before this. That was it for me. I bolted out of the room crying and ran to find my mom and her boyfriend. I told them everything, and we all went into their room together. At first, we were all just sitting around trying to calm down. That's when we heard the knocking. It was coming from the wall. The wall from my bedroom, the room we had just left. The knocking kept going. Then we heard what sounded like children running up and down the stairs. We were scared, but we tried to ignore it. That's when my friend, who was sitting on the bed, got dragged. There was no one near her. There was no way she should have moved like that, and yet she did. When I looked at her arms, there were 3 red claw marks. The knocking got progressively louder, and it moved up and down the wall, getting more and more aggressive. My mom's boyfriend put his ear to the wall, and the second that he did, the knocking became violent, heavy, like something was responding to him listening. Then, a single, massive bang. It hit the dresser in the room that we were all in. The dresser was pressed against the same wall the knocking had been coming from, and no one else was near it. And after that, in a second, everything stopped, as if nothing had happened at all. We stayed awake until sunrise, and eventually we went back into my room and slept for a few hours. One of my friends left early that morning, and honestly, I don't blame her. I would have called my parents immediately. But that wasn't the only thing that had ever happened in that house. One day, I had come home from my uncle's funeral. He had passed away in our backyard. And after that, the back door would open by itself. No wind, no explanation. I also started having the same dream over and over again. His funeral, replaying exactly as it happened. And one night, I woke up with this deep, soul-gripping feeling that someone was watching me. I was sleeping in the living room, which had 2 huge windows. The fear was so intense that I pulled the blanket over my head and I didn't move. Then I heard faint tapping on the window. I never looked. I just stayed frozen until it stopped. And even now, thinking about that house, I just know we weren't alone.
Hide and Clap from The Conjuring scared all of us, but I have a real life story to tell you about it. This guy said that when he was like 10 years old, he lived in this old house, as all stories start, but he had his own bedroom separate from his brother's, but his brother would get scared sometimes, so his brother would want to come and stay in the room with him. He had a massive bunk bed, but they both slept on the bottom part of it. So he's sleeping at one end, his brother's at the other end. He said he wakes up from being like sound asleep to someone clapping over his face, and the air of it and the sound woke him up. Immediately, he thought it was his brother. So he looks down at his brother. His brother's not moving. He's like, okay, he's just messing with me, trying to scare me or whatever. It's working. Good for him. So he tries to go back to sleep. And it happens again, like the big, like right above his face in the air. He raises up this time, like kicks towards his brother. His brother is clearly asleep. His brother wakes up a little bit. He asks him, like, are you clapping over my face? Like, did you clap over my face? The brother just looks at him, like, stunned. He could tell that he had been asleep. So he said he doesn't know if it was just because he was so scared or what, so he lays back down, covers his face up, and he fell asleep. He doesn't remember anything after that. The next morning, he asked his brother about it. The brother said, I heard the clapping. I thought you were doing it. But the brother heard it later because the brother said when he heard the clapping, the other brother was asleep. So years go by, right? He doesn't really say anything about it. He just knows that it's like a haunted house. But then they tell their parents, and their parents won't tell them anything about the house other than the original owner died in the house, and that they got the house for a good deal because no one else wanted it, because they knew the guy had died in it. You know, your typical ends up with an old house that someone died in story. Until later in life, he said that he was telling a friend about it, and the friend said, oh my gosh, do you think that it could have been like a real person? Like, what if the person was like playing that game, hide and clap with you? That was my dog. And he was hiding under the bed, but neither one of you checked. Which is scarier. It's scarier to think that it was a real person trying to play hide and clap with them, because he said that the back door was left unlocked a lot, so it is very possible that someone could have broke into his house to do that. Yeah, I don't like that. I don't like that at all.
The internet is scary for so many reasons, we know that, and in this case, it's a story about a college student being abducted by her sugar daddy. I hate to say it, but the ending of the story is worse than anyone could have ever imagined. Mackenzie Lewick was born March 8th of 1996, and she was raised in a city called El Segundo, a city right outside of Los Angeles, California. She grew up with her 3 brothers in what her family described to be a close-knit, loving home. As a high school student, she was friendly, she was outgoing, she was athletic, she swam competitively, and she also played water polo. After graduating, Mackenzie enrolled at the University of Utah, where she was planning on majoring in kinesiology and pre-nursing. At the time of this story, she was a senior in college and planning a career in health sciences. She had also mentioned the possibility of continuing her education by going to either nursing school or medical school. Mackenzie was also a member of the A Chi O sorority, and she was working in a Salt Lake City biological testing lab. Her friends described her to be bubbly, nurturing, kind-hearted, quote, a ball of light. So all of that gives you an idea of what kind of person Mackenzie was. However, important to note, there was a side of Mackenzie's life that her family members did not know about. And that was that Mackenzie was what some people refer to as a sugar baby. Months prior to her life being ripped away from her way too soon, she had been offering advice to other girls on social media who had also expressed interest in finding sugar daddies. And at one point, she also left a public comment with advice and a sentence about how she currently had 2 arrangements, aka 2 sugar daddies at that time. This hidden part of her life would unfortunately connect her with a man who had nothing but ill intentions. The weekend of June 15th, 2019 was a weekend that everything changed. Mackenzie had flown home to California for her grandmother's funeral to spend time with her family and also to attend the funeral. It was held at the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints that weekend, and Mackenzie's last ever post on social media before she disappeared was a touching tribute to her grandma, along with photos of her grandma, her grandpa, and her mother. It was obviously a very sad, hard, emotional weekend, but eventually Mackenzie did have to go back to Salt Lake City. She had exams to take, she had classes to attend to, she had to get caught up on everything that she had missed, given that she was getting closer and closer to graduation. She landed back at Salt Lake City International Airport from California on June 17th, and as soon as she landed, as was routine for her, she texted her parents to let them know that she had landed safely, and her parents did not know it yet, but that would be the last time they would ever hear from Mackenzie again. She landed just after 1 in the morning, and she called a Lyft to the airport, but Mackenzie did not go home. Instead, she gave the driver an address that didn't make sense to anyone who knew her. The address was to Hatch Park in North Salt Lake, about 8 miles away from her apartment. Around 3 in the morning, the driver later told police that Mackenzie met up with someone at the park that he dropped her off at. He said that she didn't seem to be uncomfortable or in any sort of distress at all. According to court documents, the Lyft driver said that she was met by someone who then helped her put her luggage inside of a vehicle. And again, she appeared completely normal, completely chilled out, not concerned at all to see the person that was waiting for her. I think also she told the Lyft driver not to worry about anything because obviously it was the middle of the night. I think she told him, listen, I know that this is weird that you're dropping me off at a park in the middle of the night, but don't worry, I'm meeting up with a friend. By all accounts, it sounded like Mackenzie went willingly to meet up with this person. And who was this person? His name was Aula Ajagi. 31-year-old Aula was a man that Mackenzie had been talking to the last several months on a website. I think website, maybe app, or both, whatever. She had been talking to him for the last several months back and forth. And what we know about Aula is that he was an IT worker who had worked for pretty high-profile companies. He was originally from Nigeria, but was in the States to work. He had briefly been in the Army National Guard, and he studied computer science at Utah State University, but never graduated. If you looked at this guy guy in a very surface level way. He seemed normal enough, but that wasn't necessarily the case because there were bright neon red flags about who this guy really was. And let's talk through some of those things. In 2012, he had been banned from campus for several reasons, including problems with his visa and allegations that he had stolen somebody's iPad. In 2014, he had been investigated in connection with an S8 case. However, not much progressed in regards to that because that victim ultimately decided not to press charges. In 2018, he met a woman through a dating app and invited her back to his place, where he then S8'd her. Apparently, the woman had come over, and when they were watching TV, Aula completely threw himself onto her, even after it was clear that she didn't want absolutely anything to do with him. When she tried to get away, he pinned her down and bit her at least 3 times, causing, quote, significant pain and leaving behind bruising and bite marks. But that's not all, because Aula has also been accused by his ex-wife, who has claimed that she was really scared of him throughout their marriage because of certain comments that he made to her that really made her fear for her life. His ex-wife was so scared that he would actually go through and hurt her or do something worse that she ended up completely cutting communication with him. That same ex-wife also reported that he had tendencies of getting, quote, real aggressive when she didn't do what he demanded. Another very sus thing from Aula is that in the months leading up to meeting up with Mackenzie, he had met with a contractor to talk about building out a hidden room underneath his front porch. He wanted this to be about the size of a walk-in closet with thumbprint locks so only he could access it, and he also wanted large hooks placed in the wall about head height, specifically hooks anchored into concrete walls. The contractor has said, quote, he was adamant about getting it done really fast and money was no object. Thankfully, the contractor was so uncomfortable and so put off by all of his weird requests that he ultimately decided to turn down the project. So, this was the man that 23-year-old Mackenzie Lewick was meeting up with in the middle of the night at that park. Now, as far as how they met / began talking, that was back in 2018 through a dating website called Seeking Arrangements. Seeking Arrangements is a platform for quote-unquote sugar daddies to meet quote-unquote sugar babies. So the two of them had been in contact for a while. Some reports even say that they had been texting for over a year. And the night that they were finally set to meet in person was that night in June at the park. But what Mackenzie did not know, what she could not have known, was that this wasn't a date, it was a trap. Her last text message to Aula was at 2:58 in the morning. Her phone would be turned off at 2:59 in the morning and it would never be turned back on again. In the early hours of June 17th, Mackenzie was dropped off at Hatch Park where the two of them met up. Afterwards, he drove her back to his house at a neighborhood called Fair Park. There, he tied her hands behind her back with zip ties and rope. Moments later, he tried using his hands but couldn't because I assumed that Mackenzie was putting up a fight, understanding what was happening to her. So Aula grabbed a belt and used that on Mackenzie until she eventually stopped moving. Mackenzie Lewick lost her life sometime in the early hours of the morning, June 17th of 2019. She had just turned 23 years old 3 months earlier. The following day, Aula now had a new problem to deal with. There was a deceased body inside of his house and he needed to get rid of it immediately. And how exactly was he planning on doing so? Well, he was gonna burn it. Aula drove himself over to a grocery store where he purchased a gas can and filled it up with gasoline. When he returned home, he took that along with the body to his backyard. I honestly don't know what time of day it was when he was doing all of this, but I really don't think that it was, say, in the middle of the night. I don't know how nobody saw what he was doing. Maybe it was covered up by a fence. I don't know. But the reason why I say I don't think that it was in the middle of the night was because his neighbors started complaining about a horrible smell. And apparently, at least one of those neighbors told him to stop doing whatever he was doing because it smelled really, really bad. Obviously, they had no idea, no way of knowing that what they were smelling was the literal destruction of a human body. Back at Mackenzie's school, her friends knew that Mackenzie had been out of town, obviously, for her grandma's funeral, but then a couple of days passed when Mackenzie should have been back, yet no one could get a hold of her. As far as her parents, they knew that she had landed back safely in Utah because she had texted them to tell them so, but after a couple of days of their messages going unanswered, they quickly, too, began to really worry. They didn't worry immediately because she was in college. They had just seen her. Mackenzie was really, really close to her family, but it wasn't a super alarming thing if they went a few days without talking to each other. But by June 20th, the concern had really grown. At first, her dad wanted to believe that maybe she had lost her phone and maybe that was the reason as to why she was not answering, but she did have a laptop. She also would have been able to use a friend's phone or done something to let her parents know that she was okay, but she hadn't. So by June 20th, 3 days after she had landed back in Utah, Mackenzie's father called authorities to fill them in and tell them that he needed help in finding his daughter. daughter. And his voice on the call breaks my heart because you can tell that he's trying to stay calm and collected, trying not to assume the worst. But the concern in his voice is so noticeable, and it's heartbreaking to listen to. She was reported missing at 4 p.m. on June 20th, and while authorities were doing their thing, starting to look through Mackenzie's electronic devices, getting CCTV footage from the airport, getting hold of her Lyft driver, her family and friends turned to social media to post about her disappearance and ask the public for help. After talking to the Lyft driver, it didn't take long for authorities to identify Aula. But shockingly enough, on June 24th, Aula voluntarily walked into the Salt Lake City Police Department on his own. This was a week after Mackenzie had been reported missing, and his demeanor when he showed up to the station was very much, I don't know anything, I've never met her in person, but I'm here to cooperate and help you because I want to help you find her. He was full on putting up an act, trying to play the good guy. He did admit to have texted Mackenzie before, but he was sticking to his story that he had never met her in person. Quote, "Yeah, we never met before, so that would be weird to meet at that time of night. That's not safe for her or safe for me," end quote. But police officers knew that he was lying. And they had a very, very strong feeling that Aula knew way more than he was letting on. And that feeling was only confirmed after phone records showed that both Mackenzie and Aula's location had both been at Hatch Park within less than a minute apart from each other the night of her disappearance. On June 26, authorities got a search warrant to search through Aula's house. During that search warrant, they brought with them a cadaver dog. And what do you know? Almost immediately, the dog alerted to the smell of a human body in the backyard. And the closer that investigators looked in that area, the area that the dog was alerting to, the worse things were looking for Aula. And their biggest nightmare was about to be proven true. Police found a human bone, charred muscular tissue, part of a scalp with blonde hair that was confirmed to be Mackenzie's, a cell phone, and other charred personal items in Aula's backyard. That was obviously more than enough to arrest him. Aula Ajagi was arrested and charged with kidnapping, obstructing justice, and of a human body on June 28th. After his arrest, it took him a little bit, but he eventually did tell his attorneys where the rest of Mackenzie was buried. And on July 3rd, authorities found her. Her remains had been buried beneath some trees just off a main road in a shallow grave with her arms still bound behind her back with those zip ties and rope. An autopsy later revealed significant signs of blunt force trauma, leaving a 5-centimeter hole in her skull with part of her scalp missing. She was in an area that was around 85 miles away from Aula's house and nearly 100 miles north of Salt Lake City. On October 7th of 2020, to avoid facing trial, Aula pled guilty on all charges. And it was at his sentencing that Mackenzie's family finally got a chance to speak. Her mother, Diana, said, quote, "This sentence today will not bring back Mackenzie, but I hope it will keep this defendant out of the public eye and unable to commit these heinous crimes again," end quote. And in his victim impact statement, her father, Gregory, stated, quote, "My daughter, Mackenzie Lueck, was a sweet, amazing young lady with the world ahead of her. She was a kind-hearted person that cared about others. Now I will not have the opportunity to see her blossom in life," end quote. Aula was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. He also got an additional 1 to 15 years and an additional up to 5 years. All sentenced to be run consecutively, meaning back to back. So there he is now, 36 years old, serving his sentence, and he will never be released from prison. Thank God. Yeah, everything about this is so terrible. That is all from me today. Thank you for spending time with me today and for listening to Mackenzie's story. I hope you guys are having the best day. If not, go do something to make it the best day. Make somebody happy, and I will see you in my next video. Massive kiss on the forehead to every single one of you.
Have you ever heard of Trevor Deely? Trevor was born on August 15th of 1978. His parents were Michael and Ann Deely, and he was the youngest of 4 siblings. Trevor grew up in Ireland, and after he finished school, he went to the Waterford Institute of Technology, but did drop out during his second year. He would then go on to complete a computer course in Dublin. Trevor took a job at the Bank of Ireland working in the IT department, and overall it seems like he was pretty happy. In late November of 2000, he went on a trip to Alaska with one of his friends who got him a deal on a flight because his friend was a longtime flight attendant. During the summer before he went on this trip, he had met a girl in Dublin who is from Alaska and was just vacationing in Ireland. He went to go see her. When he got back, he had plans to go to his company Christmas party, which was on December 7th of 2000. At the party, they were having a good time, they had several drinks, and then they would move to another nightclub. At about 3:25 in the morning, he started walking in the direction of his apartment complex. That night when he was walking, there was a pretty good storm going on, and there were wind gusts of up to 60 to 70 miles per hour. There was also a taxi strike going on, so he couldn't exactly call a taxi. After walking for roughly 10 minutes, Trevor got to his workplace where he was let up after calling security. When he got up to the office, he was talking to a colleague. He made himself a cup of tea and was making notes for what he needed to do the next morning. The colleague that was there was working the night shift. He then left the office at 4:03 in the morning. He took an umbrella with him, and while he was walking back towards his apartment, he called another friend. This friend did not pick up the phone, so Trevor left a voicemail, and the friend described it as saying something along the lines of, "Hi Glenn, I've missed you there, just on my way home, all going good. I'll talk to you tomorrow." Now, the friend did delete this voicemail because he didn't think that it was significant, and he figured that he would talk to Trevor later. Now, there is CCTV footage from this case, and the CCTV footage from the bank that Trevor was working at did show a man dressed in black waiting outside the bank approximately half an hour before Trevor arrived. When Trevor got there, they had a very quick conversation, and then he went into the bank. After that, 2 more men arrived at this gate. Now, the 2 men that entered after Trevor went into the bank have been identified and cleared, but the man in black is still a person of interest. And by the time Trevor left the bank, that man was no longer waiting there. At about 4:15 in the morning, Trevor is seen walking by another bank, and then a couple of seconds later, another man in black was walking the same route that Trevor was. Now, he was walking towards his apartment. The man in black has been identified and ruled out as a suspect, but this CCTV footage is the last known footage of Trevor. When Trevor didn't show up for work the next day, his colleagues weren't that concerned because it had been a late night, so it wasn't that strange. But when he didn't show up for work the following Monday, that's when they knew that something was wrong. So they called his family and the search began. And that's pretty much the evidence that we have. Now, Trevor's family was extremely proactive in trying to find him. Within a couple of days, they had put up thousands of missing persons posters, and they went house to house seeing if anyone had seen Trevor or knew what had happened to him. Now, they did search several bodies of water that were near the area where Trevor went missing, but again, they found nothing. Police officers and Trevor's family went to Alaska to see if the girl he had gone to see knew anything about his disappearance, but these trips produced no leads. In December of 2016, the CCTV footage showing Trevor talking to the man in black outside of his work was enhanced, and then also the CCTV footage of him walking past the bank and then that man following him again was also enhanced, and people believe that they are in fact the same person. And that's really the end. There has been some speculation that maybe there was gang violence involved as far as Trevor's disappearance and that his life was taken because of this. In the area, there was known to be some kind of gang activity, but that really all turned out to be nothing. But his family is still looking for him, and they deserve answers. I cannot imagine going this long without knowing what happened to my son or daughter or anyone. So if anyone knows anything, please reach out to the local authorities. But what are your thoughts on this case? Let me know down in the comments and follow for more true crime.